right, time for more Shannon Reads Those Books with War and Peace. War and Peace. I have finally finished War and Peace, and I can't believe I actually haven't chatted about War and Peace in its entirety yet. I know I've talked about it in a lot of Friday reads, and I did a couple of early on in my reading of this epic novel. I did do some updates here and there, but when it came down to it, I didn't end up talking about it, you know, as a sum. So let's do that here. If you're not familiar, I actually started doing this as a buddy read with my friend Paddy Moran. Hey Paddy! And we started last summer in July, starting to read it. And I think the goal was the end of the summer, and then it sort of pushed and pushed and pushed. I think he finished before the end of the year, and I finished in January. So it's a long one. It's a long one. My copy is 1,308 pages. I ended up actually reading a lot of it on my Kindle. I read it. It's just why I like this version is it actually had the book and part and then chapter, because there's a book, part, and chapter for each of the sections. And but it just ended up being too heavy in my hands, so I had to go with my Kindle. And once I got it on my Kindle, I got right back to it. So that was very exciting. So now this actually makes those books list for being number 20 on the BBC Big Reads. I'm actually surprised it's only on that list, and that's really high, especially for something voted in to be 20 out of 200. That was, pretty crazy. This is written, of course, by Leo Tolstoy. It was written in 1869. I think it was done serialized, but it's actually set 1805 to 1813-ish. And the premise of this is actually, this book was very different than I expected. And the premise of this one is actually, it's a family saga set during the Napoleonic Wars, and it follows a couple of different families and their social and political happenings throughout the Napoleonic Wars. And these families are prominent, mostly prominent in Russian society, and it's set in Russia. So for me, there were lots of things about this that just like I can't like when I first started reading it, I was like, what? It's all like high society and parties and stuff like that, and who's gonna meet who, and what's the correct cultural thing to do in this moment, and or if someone made a social gaffe, and I'm like, what? Like I thought this was gonna be like in the trenches and that kind of stuff. And that part is part of the book. There is definitely war in this, but the elements of it are not as frequent, like as I expected. And they're also, it's more about the effect of and the effect of war and the effect on people and of the communities. And so it wasn't actually really in those moments very much, which it just wasn't what I was expecting. And some of those moments were extremely powerful, and then some of them were, for me, it was very confusing, because I guess there's a whole social hierarchy that I was not familiar with, not only for just people in society, but then that also pretty much translated to people's position in the military, and then not being familiar with the military terms and who are these different kind of military people and what do they do. It doesn't follow people that are physically in the trenches very much. So, but it does at times, but not as much as I thought it would. Anyway, overall, I did really enjoy it. It is really long, but it's not that hard to understand. I was really impressed by that, especially since, like, when you first start out, it's mostly just people in society. There is a huge number of people in this book, and it's one of those ones that if you find it daunting, it's probably worth taking a look either at the character list, which I avoided because I didn't want to be spoiled and to know like who was important versus not important. I did try to keep a character list for a while, but it just got too unwieldy. Another thing that might be helpful if you don't want to go that far is that also, if you find out or already understand Russian naming conventions, that would be helpful, because people have really long involved names, and I think it is sort of how it works is that men take on their middle name is their father's name, so that sort of helps understanding
who's who in the sort of family structure. But then I also found it confusing because people were often referred to by their title and not their name. And then if they were referred to by their name, they were often referred to by uh, what's it called, like a sweetheart name, a term of endearment, or a truncated version of their name that for me wasn't familiar, that someone named Natasha would be called whatever. Like, it just didn't match up, because I'm not Russian. So I just don't know that kind of thing. And also, I don't know if this is the first Russian book that I've read as someone who is half Latvian. It's a little strange to read something as, before I have stories of my family in Latvia. So, but just, when you think of the, personal history and then you mesh it with a book that you're reading, sometimes the weird things happen. But I didn't actually think about this too much. I actually just was interesting to see it from a Russian point of view. But that was also really weird because one of the prominent characters is like, a lot of people also speak French, and then of course Napoleon's French. Uh, but nothing from Napoleon's perspective, I don't think. I don't remember. He's in it, but not much. But yeah, so, where was I going with that? But then there's a lot of like speaking in French too. And this actually, I really like this translation, both for the or edition, both for the physical copy, and then I got the Kindle version of the exact same copy, because anytime it was in French, it actually had the French and then also the translation, which was really nice because I did take French till grade 12, and my French ain't great, but so I enjoyed reading the French and trying to get a sense of what does this mean, and then reading the translation. So that was nice as well for that particular edition. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on in this one, but it was much more accessible than I expected. But the other thing that I wasn't expecting is it actually really is a commentary. Actually, no, I was expecting it to be sort of a commentary on war, but it's much more direct to the reader, on the philosophical point of view, and the philosophical point of view of war and happenings. And it was when it sort of had these moments, I was like not expecting it. Like, all of a sudden I feel like the author came off the page and sat beside me and said, well, dearie, this is what I'm telling you. And it's just kind of like, it was very jarring because I'm like, you're the author. What are you doing here? Like it's just like, you're in this fictional world where there's real life events, but this fictional world of, you know, balls and, people trying to figure out who they're going to marry or if they're going to marry, and people being sent off to war and not knowing what to do, and the horrors of war. And then all of a sudden someone's telling you what this story is about. And I was like, whoa, back off, buddy. Can't I make up my own mind? So, but so that kind of sway, like, it kind of was unexpected, and it happened several times. And then later, the epilogues are like, this is really what it's about. Like, if you're gonna write your essay, this is the point. So this is the point I'm making. So, like, well, although I appreciated that, I was also kind of like, huh, like, don't I get to make up my own mind? Okay. So that was a bit strange. So anyway, one of the things that I would like to do is I would like to watch some adaptations of this, because it's such a huge text. There's so many characters and so many perspectives that you could go from. And I'm curious because I did watch the first section of the recent A&E adaptation, and it was very different than I expected. The takes on, like, who was the protagonist and what you're supposed to feel towards them. I was like, what, who? We're supposed to feel that for who? Like, so it was very not how I felt about it. But also it made me realize that because it takes a while to get centered in who the characters are, the characters from the beginning, I messed them all up. Like, later, as the chapters and books and came on, I knew who was who, but at the beginning it was all kind of blurry. So that was kind of interesting. So, but there were some really beautiful, heartfelt, just awe-inspiring moments of sort of humanity, and of powerful moments in a person's life that I really truly appreciated, like that just make this book a real cut above. Like I know it's on a lot of lists and it's, you know, there's a huge weight of importance on it, and I don't always agree with whether or not things are not as important as they say, but I don't always feel the importance or feel what, you know, other people feel about books that are on these lists. And with this book, I felt, you know, for the characters, I felt there were some beautiful moments in here that I will never forget. And that doesn't always happen with me with books. I read a lot, and a lot of it's quite enjoyable and might come in and out, and there you go. But like this one, it's like, wow, that was powerful. That was a true human moment. And for that, I really appreciate it. And I really, really am glad that I read it. And also, I gotta say, for me, it's a huge accomplishment. I did not anticipate reading this, you know, like one casual Facebook conversation with Paddy, and then like all of a sudden we're on this huge epic journey. And I would recommend, if you are going to read it, to read it with someone so that you can keep each other encouraged, whether or not you're on track or not on track. It's a great way to tackle something that's this big. Like it's just like sometimes you feel like, am I ever going to get through this? But I did, and I'm sure that you can too. So definitely look forward to chatting with Paddy. We are hoping to talk about it together on YouTube to share our thoughts, and I'm sure at that point we'll get more into the specifics. I wanted to keep this relatively spoiler free for people who haven't read it, but I would recommend it. It's not as intimidating. It's just really, really long, but it's not that hard to read. It's very, very accessible and quite worth it. So there you go, War and Peace. Yeah, I did it! Woo! I do feel like dancing around. All right, thanks so much for watching.